Hi everyone, my name is Philippe Thiffeault. Today I'm with David Duffett. David Duffett is currently the founder and can I say president of Let the Geek Speak.
You can say whatever you like, Phil.
All right. So David, current involvement is conference chair member of the Open Source World, a yearly conference during the TMC's IT Expo conference held every year, usually in Florida. Is also founder and CTO of Telespeak, namely an asterisk and SIP-based communication training and consultant company. Correct me if I'm wrong. And founder and president skill coach at Let the Geek Speak, or current core topic for this session for this webinar. Um, David is an experienced public speaker teaching geeks how to deliver comprehensive presentation for the past 25 years. David provided technical speaking training all around the world, helping engineer performing technical presentation for the common of mortal. So for the today agenda, we'll do a brief presentation about the 7 powerful principles of communication, which David is the expert in the matter. I'm going to do a very brief, short presentation about VoIP.ms and Q&A. However, I know for the Q&A, usually we wait to the end for it. But I'm gonna let the question flows in and probably gonna stop you from time to time if there's any relevant question that we can jump in on the moment.
Yeah, sure. We welcome any questions.
Great. So, David, before we did dive into 7 principle of communication, can you briefly tell us how and why you became a speaker coach or skills trainer?
Sure. Yeah. I have always loved communications, and even before I got into communications as a job, I used to do things like wire up PBXs in my house, so you could phone from the kitchen through to the bedroom or whatever it was. I just was very interested, and also two-way radio, CB radio, that kind of stuff. Just always had an interest in communications, and I was very blessed quite early on in my career to get a job as an instructor for the Civil Aviation Authority. That's a little bit like the FAA in America. And I was teaching people how to repair air-ground communication systems for air traffic control. So that was quite exciting and quite interesting to learn the way that all hung together, and to be able to teach people how to troubleshoot and get these mission critical systems back on the air if they ever went off. And of course, they never did go off because we had backup systems to jump in. But that was quite exciting. From there, I got more into the commercial world of telecoms, and I was the training manager in several different telecoms companies, having teams of trainers to train people either internally inside the organization or sometimes to sell training to customers about what we were doing. And from there, I got into VoIP in the early 2000s, and I was fortunate enough to come across Asterisk reasonably early on in about 2003 or 4. And I just saw that this was the future. This was the way things were going. And I kind of fell in love with it, started using Asterisk myself, and started getting other people enthusiastic about it. And I met Mark Spencer, the creator of Asterisk. And ultimately, in the world of Asterisk, I ended up being the community director for the worldwide Asterisk community. And so I would fly around the world and talk about Asterisk, which was a great job because that's what I loved doing anyway. I was already talking about Asterisk, and now I had this job. And part of that was to run the global Asterisk conference that we did every year called Astricon. And at that time, we were getting up to 700 people come along, and we'd have 60, maybe even more than 60 speakers. And I was responsible for helping to select those speakers and also curate the whole content with the different tables of conference sessions. And at one of the conferences, I think we had 5 tracks in parallel. So 5 different sessions that people could attend at any one point in time. And what happened, Philippe, is a combination of going around the world and talking about Asterisk at other people's conferences and running our own conferences. I realized that there's a lot of very, very clever people out there, very well-meaning people, but it looked like they could have done a little bit better at making presentations. And so I thought I spotted a way that I could help the community.
Technical subjects, it's very tough to deliver. Usually when I'm doing as a sales director, I have to do a lot of networking activities and PRs and so on. And it's one of the great challenge, even though VoIP or phone services, it's pretty common services. It's almost a commodity now. In fact, it is a commodity now. So it it's still a challenge for me to in a very short period of time to make them understand what I'm doing. Because just saying I'm selling phone, it's a little bit reductive. It's a little bit not so sexy. So but what VoIP.ms have to offer, it's much more than just selling phone. So it's one of my great challenge every time I'm going in front of non-technical people or technical people from other field, just to make them quickly so I can clearly identify myself as the people that you or you are coaching and that you were describing a few seconds ago. So yeah, it's I think delivering good information in in a way everybody almost can understand. It's a great challenge. So definitely there's a niche for this market.
Right, right. Yes. Well, one of the things that we tend to do as technical people is because we love the technology, we tend to want to tell people about all the technology, and sometimes that's not relevant. And there was a great American speaker called Zig Ziglar, and he had a quote which goes that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. And if you really do care for your audience, then what you do is you kind of cut down your material and make it relevant for your audience, to show that you are interested in, conveying the right information to them rather than overloading them with stuff that might not be relevant.
That's yeah, that can be more true. Yeah, it's always start by caring about the person in front of you first. Yeah, and you don't always have the same audience. So um so as we were just saying, explaining a technical concept to non-technical audience, it can be a challenge. So am I right saying vulgarization of complex topic require preparation and practice? So is it public speaking earn or learn skill, or it can be in it? I guess some people have it much easier than other, but uh, can you, from your experience, can you split between innate skills or earned skills?
Well, what's really interesting, Philip, is that you don't really have to coax children to jump out in front of people and start speaking, do you? Your 3-year-old or your 4-year-old loves getting in front of everybody and having an audience and talking about whatever they want to talk about. Maybe they've got something that they want to say or a poem that they want to recite or something like that. And yet, as we go through the education system, we get more self-conscious and a little bit more concerned about what people think of us. And this is the difficulty. So I would say actually the ability to get out in front of people is somewhat innate, but we have it learned out of us as we progress. Because what happens is we get more and more conscious of what other people think. And one of the things that people often say to me is, oh, I'm really scared of speaking in public. And actually, of course, I believe there is a degree of fear that comes with that, but I think that there's more fear associated with getting in front of a group of people and feeling unprepared or ill-prepared than the actual fear of speaking in public. And so what we'll see is when I get onto the 7 power presenting protocols that we're going to look at, 5 of those, a full 5 of them, are actually about preparing before you ever step out in front of people, so that you are in a fully organized position to talk about the things you want to talk about. And actually, in the world of preparing for a talk, the shorter the talk, the more preparation you need. You know, it's a little bit like preparing to write a tweet. In the old days, when it literally was 140 characters, you had to work quite hard to fit your core message into those 140 characters. Well, you know, if you've got a 20-minute slot to do a presentation and you really care about your audience, then you're going to work very hard to get the relevant information at the right technical level into that little slot.
Again, it's all about preparation. So yeah, you need to understand how to deliver. So there's there's theory and applicable concept to it, and
yes,
to do a very quick segue to your presentation about the 7 principles. So what are the 7 principles of communication and how they can help to become a better speaker?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Thank you, Philippe. I'm going to bring up a little presentation. It's not a mega long one, so I'm just going to share the screen here. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to do that. And what we should find is that we have a presentation there. Are you seeing that, Philippe? And are the audience seeing that? Have you got it, Philippe? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
No, sorry, I was saying yes, but yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, so you were talking about the theory that there is behind making presentations. Of course, part of that theory is when people are paying attention. So attention spans and things like that. And as I go through these 7 power presenting protocols, that, by the way, if you're watching this, you can take these 7 power presenting protocols home and use them and start making a difference to your presentations immediately, either when you're constructing a new presentation or using them as 7 lenses through which to look at your existing presentations. So here's the first one. It's the purpose. Just taking a step back and thinking about why you're delivering this presentation. What tends to happen, and I'm sorry to say this, Philippe, but what tends to happen is when we're asked to make a presentation, or when any geek is asked to make a presentation, they think, oh yeah, I've got a deck of slides that I borrowed from Bill or that Mary gave me. And I think if I shuffle those slides around a little bit, take this one out, put that one in, you know, that'll probably do the job. And really, the slides are not the presentation. So you should really take a step back, have a little bit of a sit down and think about what is the purpose of my presentation. Not only what am I trying to achieve within the confines of this 20 minutes or 40 minutes, but what is the wider context of what I'm trying to achieve. Let me give you an example. It may be that the presentation is all about telling people the top 5 features of a new product. And that's great. So you've got a very straightforward objective there. But actually, in the wider world, in the context of the business, maybe the overall objective is to stop so many tech support calls coming in about this product when we release it. So we want to do a better job of telling people about it and how it works so that we minimize the load on the tech support team. And so by actually writing down what it is we're trying to achieve, and then sending it to our target audience before we ever meet them, because there's no presentation piece that says you're not allowed to talk to people before you meet them. So you could say, right, you know, here's this email's just got a couple of lines in. This is what I'm thinking to try and achieve with my presentation. How does that sound? Let people comment on it, go through an iterative cycle, and you can arrive at the right thing. So purpose is all about why are you doing this? What are you trying to achieve? And defining the outcomes, and then agreeing those outcomes with the audience. Then we got the plan, and this is where we touch on a little bit of the theory, because we know that people's attention spans tend to be larger at the beginning. They're more tuned into what you're saying, and then over the course of an experience, they go down, and then they come up at the end. This is why in the world of TV advertising, the first ad in a TV ad break costs more than the rest. And the last one also costs more than the rest. So that's the planning. Then we got preferences, and we want to think about what people are wanting to learn, and more importantly, how they're going to learn it. Some people learn by doing. I would submit that a lot of engineers, a lot of technical people like to get their hands on things and learn by doing, but there are other people that like to read manuals and so on. So we need to consider people's preferences. Then we got practice. Now, I don't think I'm breaking too many confidences, Philippe, when I say that very often the way that geeks practice a presentation is they sit in front of their laptop, go through the PowerPoint slides and just think about what they're going to say when a certain slide pops up. They use the slides as a reminder what to say. That is not real practice. Real practice is doing it out loud. And there's a number of advantages that come from that.
In French, in French we say doing une italienne. I don't know if it's the same in English, but it's practicing out loud in front of maybe with a counterpart or somebody, but without the actual. It's like a rehearsal, but without really all the setup and everything. So it's
Right.
practicing the real practice sometimes it's much more important than just trying to remember everything. Anyway, you're never gonna go through the script point by point. So
yeah, very much so. Practicing out loud is so important because it gives you, for instance, you have a good idea of the timing of your session when you practice out loud. Also, you learn key words and phrases that in your mind sounded really good, but if you're not careful, maybe you trip over them and they're a bit more clunky when you come to say them out loud. So real life practice is very important. Then there's participation. Nobody likes having anything done to them or at them, but everybody loves having things done with them. And so the more you can involve people in your presentation, the better. Then you've got the actual performance part. And at this point, Philippe, I just want to stop and just note that those first 5 protocols are all before you ever get in front of your audience. Yes, you've communicated with your audience to make sure that there's an overlap between what you want to deliver and what they want to receive. You've done that at the purpose stage, but all of this has happened before you actually get up on stage or get in front of the group. Then we've got the performance protocol, which is all about the actual delivery. That's where we'd think about how to avoid the appearance of nerves, if that's a subject of concern to us and things like that, and how to use our bodies and our voice for maximum effectiveness. And then the last one is the post-event. What do we actually do after we've delivered the presentation to ensure maximum effectiveness? Now, Philippe, I'm not sure how long we've got. I can go into a little bit more detail of each of these, if you like. And I've got some slides to do that, or I can give a summary.
Sure. We have about an hour schedule, so feel free to.
Okay. Well, in that case, brilliant. Yeah, let me just jump in. So, of course, the way that our technical skills and abilities are measured is often how much we know, whether we know our stuff or not. And so when we're looking to stand out when we deliver a presentation, we've got to surrender to the fact that knowing your stuff is not enough. We all know people who are marvelous and really clever at what they do, and yet they don't necessarily have the ability to project that, to communicate that. So if we remember that knowing your stuff is not enough, we then remember that actually it's all about the people that we're serving. And as we focus on our audience to give them our absolute best, then that is when we're going to achieve the most for them and for us. And the other thing to remember is that you don't have to be a mile ahead to win the race. Sadly, there's a lot of bad presentations out there. And so by making sure that your presentation is a bit better in each of these areas that I'm talking about, you will stand out, you will win the race. So first of all, the purpose then, as I said, we need to sit back and think deeply about what we're trying to achieve. And we want to encapsulate it in a small set of words. This doesn't have to be a long document. In fact, I would suggest that smaller is better. Maybe it's just a couple of paragraphs about what we're trying to achieve. And once we've got that, what we do is we share it from us, the person that's going to be presenting. We share it to the person that asked us to make the presentation in the first place, and to the audience as well. Now, of course, there are circumstances where we can't talk to the audience ahead of time. For instance, in a webinar like this, we didn't know exactly who was going to show up. At a conference, we don't know who's going to be in the room. But what we can do is we can talk to people that know. So we could talk to the event organizers, or like you and I had this conversation, Philippe, about the kind of things that we were going to cover. And I said, is this thing going to be all right? And you said, yeah, I think that's appropriate. And so we just go round in a circle until everybody's pretty happy with the contents of those couple of paragraphs about what we're going to cover. And then what that means is when you come to do it, there's no surprises for the audience, and there's no surprises for the person that asked you
Yeah.
to
You're
do.
not gonna start talking about food diet in front of the people at the Astricon, for instance. It just doesn't make sense. Instead, maybe if you have a related point, if you can make a good example with your food diet in your Asterisk server or something, maybe okay. If you stretch that out, it's maybe possible, but the purpose is really important to capture to who you're speaking to.
Exactly. And by the way, if you've not had a chance to talk to the audience ahead of time, the very first thing you should do when you start your presentation is say, this is what I was planning to cover for our session. I've talked to Philippe and he said this is right. But what do you think? Now, when you ask an audience how they feel about it, most people are going to nod politely and say, yeah, that's about what we want to learn. Very rarely will somebody put their hand up and go, no, this is totally irrelevant. But occasionally somebody might say, well, actually, we don't really need to know about that little thing because we had a presentation about that last week, or you're missing this and we'd really like it if you could talk about this. And that's great, because that's exactly what you want. You want a marriage between what you're talking about and what the audience needs to hear. And so that's a good thing to do.
And you can
So
read the room a little bit as well.
it,
Whenever
it,
maybe they will not tell you directly, however, sometimes you can read the room a little bit and see, okay, yeah, when I explain my agenda and see the faces and people are like, okay, no, maybe I can fast forward on this point, or it can be touchy, but yeah, definitely
yeah,
asking before.
let me use an English phrase on you, Philippe. You're bang on the money there. You're quite right. You need to read the room. You need to understand how people are feeling about what you're saying. And we'll come back to that near the end. So that's the purpose. Then we got the plan. And we already said that the beginning and the ending of the presentation are the most important points. And by the way, let me offer the audience a free pro tip here. And that is never, ever, ever finish your presentations with Q&A. And the reason I say that is because the end of the presentation is prime time. It's when people are really looking to get a key message, a call to action, what your key points are. And yet so often it's wasted on this kind of Q&A mush that could be great, but it could go off in a wild direction, or somebody could ask a completely irrelevant question that takes it off course. And so when we get to the end of this, Philippe, before we get to the very end, we'll deal with questions, and then I'll finish on a couple of key points.
That's why I'm always asking during my webinar. Feel free, people, to ask a question during the webinar, because sometimes somebody will ask a very relevant and nice question that will allow us to go a little bit deeper in the little topic that we are exploring at a moment at a specific time. And otherwise, it would be a little bit more difficult to just where we were what we were talking about and go back to this point, and also for the dynamic and all that. So definitely, I as a speaker sometime, and also as an audience most of the time, I like to be able to ask questions during the webinar. This last week, I went to Hydro Quebec in Quebec, a conference where they made a presentation from VP marketing, and the lady, she was not taking question really during the session. However, she almost allow it, and it was not really. We were not even safe to do it because she did not announce it clearly. It was really like
That,
I
that's
can't. can we ask question or not? It's not clear. Yeah, definitely
Yes,
I like this.
yeah, a good speaker would have given you a very, very clear question policy right at the front. And actually, that's coming on the next slide. So I'm going to talk about that. But as you can see, we've got attention spans or attention very peaked at the beginning and end. And as I said, it naturally wanes down a little bit in the middle. And so if we're not at the beginning or the end, the primacy and the recency parts of the presentation, then we can use a couple of other things. We can overemphasize certain points, either by the use of our voice or by the use of visual aids. We can show outstanding things to people that are just a complete shock compared to what they're normally used to, or we can use familiarity, and that's about using appropriate analogies. So if you were talking to an audience of gardeners and you wanted them to learn about Ohm's law and current flowing through a circuit, you might talk about water flowing through a hose pipe. And when you put your foot on it and you impede the flow of the water, as an example. So I always talk about giving the audience proof here, using primacy, recency, overemphasis, outstanding things, and familiarity to pique people's interest as you go through.
Nice.
Now, we need a plan as well. And if we look at this plan for a presentation, it says give the first 10% over to what I call intro. Intro is impact. That's grabbing the audience's attention. The N is need, explaining why they need to take notice of your presentation. The T is the title that we'll use to crystallize what we're going to be talking about. The R is the range of things we're going to cover. And then here, this O here is either for any kind of clinical objectives, specific things we're looking to achieve. But if you put a little dash through it, Philippe, it becomes a Q for question policy. So we should never start a presentation without letting people know what the question policy is, whether that's ask throughout the presentation, whether it's, oh, please keep your questions until near the end. Whatever it is, it's good. And you did that for us. You said that people were welcome to ask questions along the way. So that's great. And by the way, of course, I can't necessarily see any hands that are getting raised or questions that are coming in the chat because I'm in this presentation. So I'm relying on you, Philippe, to keep an eye on there. Then we've got the main body of our presentation. And then at the end, you'll see that I've got QS3. And what that means is deal with any outstanding questions is the Q before you summarize, which is the S. And then the 3 is find 3 things to finish on. And I'll give you an example of that when we get near the end of the presentation. So that's a little map that I give people, because part of the lack of confidence that people have is because they have a lack of certainty about what they're going to be doing. But if they've got a little map of the presentation and how it's going to unwind or unfurl over the few minutes they've got, then they're going to be more confident. And so I like to help them out with a little map of how the presentation would work. That's plan. Now we've got preferences. And as I mentioned, there are different preferences in different people. Some people love to take action. You know, if you give them a new piece of software, they want to just start clicking with the mouse and testing out what it does. Or if it's a coffee machine, they want to start playing with it. However, there are other people out there that would prefer to read the manual first. They'd sit back in their comfy chair, read the manual about the new coffee machine before taking any action. And
it's called experience.
Well, yeah, there's a reflection part. There are some people, and I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations here, but if you were talking to an audience of HR executives, they might prefer to do a little flip chart exercise about previous coffee machines they've had and how they've worked, and do a bit of reflection first before you give them some input and then they jump in.
I'm not that old, but I can tell for me this example is really when you're younger, I always like throwing the manual and you're like, well, I'll figure out, but ultimately you're ending up always by going back in the trash, taking the manual and reading it. It's so for me, I'm calling it experience. Now, every time I'm getting a new machine or something, I'm always looking at the manual. But before, no way.
Yeah, it's interesting the way this works. So let's imagine that you are somebody that read the manual You'd read the manual, then you'd take the action, see if it does what you wanted. And if it does, that circle is complete. But now let's imagine you're somebody that's thrown away the manual, like you said, you're taking action, you're working with it, but then you find you can do just about everything you want to do apart from this one thing. And you're thinking, oh, I can do 99% of the stuff I want, but this one thing isn't working. So now I'm going to go to the trash and I'm going to pull out the manual and read that one page grudgingly, and then I'll take action. So this circle kind of has to be complete for learning to take place. Let's just ask the audience, Philippe, we've got people in the audience. Can you type into the chat what kind of person you are? Are you an input person, an action person, or a reflection person? In other words, when you're coming to a new subject or a new thing, what do you like to do first? Are you action orientated that you want to jump in? Are you input orientated that you want to read the manual? Or are you reflective that you want to kind of think about things first before you take any action? And I see we have RR who's saying that they're input and yeah, input, action or reflection. Thank you, RR. That's Roy Reynolds. Thank you for saying that you're an input person. And actually, that's quite a rare thing to find in an audience of engineers. A lot of engineers are very keen to just jump in and start playing with it. But there's nothing right or wrong about your individual approach. But let me just make this point. Imagine if you're the kind of person that loves to jump in and do it, and you're preparing a presentation for a group of people, and it turns out this group of people are the kind of people that really want to read the manual first. That should affect the way you do your presentation, because if you default to doing the way that you like it, it's going to be less effective. And so the whole thing about the preferences protocol is to take stock of your own learning style and to make sure that you don't by default jump into doing it that way, and to walk in your audience's shoes and think about the way that they would like it best.
And some audience, I don't want to go in generalities, but like you were saying, engineer or um, more technical people will sometimes be more input style of learning, or and in other circumstances, like salespeople I believe are more into the action. We will hurt ourselves by doing something, and that's how we will learn in the first place. So you can almost, and I don't want to do generalities here, but I think you can almost, based on the type of audience you are looking to speak in front of, maybe adapt your preference protocols based on the type of person you're speaking.
But very much so. Yeah, I agree with you, Philippe. I mean, all of these protocols that I'm going through, we're talking about them in the context of making a presentation, and yet actually they equally apply to running a meeting. They equally apply to having a one-to-one with somebody to give them some feedback. Now, if you were running a meeting at work, not a presentation, just a meeting, and you thought about people and you wondered whether they were input, action, or reflection led, or use any other profiling tool you want, maybe the disc profile. Are the people that I'm dealing more dominant, or are they more inspiring or supportive? Just the fact that you step back and think about the people that you're working with and how they would prefer to be dealt with is going to put you ahead of the rest. And so the preferences protocol can be applied in many different ways. Okay, so then we've got practice. And practice, as we already talked about, is doing this out loud, hopefully to an interested audience. So maybe it's your colleagues, maybe it's your friends and family. But when we think about what to practice, now, obviously, it's a good idea to practice the whole thing from beginning to end out loud. However, since we've already said that the beginning and the end of the presentation are even more important, because that's where the attention is high. And also, of course, that's where you as a speaker could feel a little bit more nervous when you first come out on stage or get in front of the group of people or start the meeting. Then it actually will pay you to invest in doing even more practice for the first couple of minutes and the last couple of minutes of your presentation in order to get that under the belt and understood. Are you with me there, Philippe?
Yeah, I was thinking when practicing, I'm I'm following a lot of coach or speaker on social media, and one of the influencer, I guess, was telling is put yourself in front of the camera and record yourself, like delivering your presentation every day, or like a couple of days in a row before the actual presentation that you have to do. Of course, it's not you're not standing out, you're not moving, your body language is not really, however, the tone of your voice, the filler word that you're using, and so on. Is it maybe I'm jumping to the when or who to, but let's say you don't have the chances to have to be able to do it in front of your colleague or friends or family much more often that you would like to, is using this trick of recording yourself for you is a good way to practice?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it would be preferable to do it to an audience that had your best interests at heart and want you to do well, and perhaps know a little bit about the subject. So that's your colleagues, if not your friends and family. But if not, everybody has got one of these mobile phones. So they've got a voice and a video recorder on that they can use. And so, yes, it's very profitable to do that. And of course, that will also give you an idea of the timing as well. If you're going to be presenting at a conference and it's important that you stick to your 20 minutes or your half an hour or whatever it is, that's helpful. And the when is really as soon as possible. Start practicing just as soon as you possibly can. Now, since you and I discussed this session, Philippe, some weeks ago, I actually won a national speaking contest here in the UK called Speaker Factor, and it was against 12 I was one of 12 finalists from around the different parts of the UK. And at the annual conference, all 12 of us presented. We were whittled down to 5. And then the 5 presented from the main stage to the audience of 200 professional speakers. So that's an interesting audience to speak to.
Yeah.
And
Congrats, David. I was about to congrat you a little bit later, but now that you're mentioning it, congrats. I think it's a very prestigious win that you did there. So I saw that on the social media when you did announce it. So very nice for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that, Philip. The point I was going to make is I was practicing all the time. When I was driving to work, I was saying my speech and recording it on my mobile phone to see how long it was. Because actually, one of the things with this particular contest was it had to be 5 minutes. And if you went below 4:45 or above 5:15, you were out. And so you had to,
Oh,
so that was part of the art, was getting resonant messages into that short space of time. Anyway, so the what, all of your speech or all of your presentation, especially the beginning and the ending. The when, start as soon as you possibly can, even when you're conceptualizing it. And then the who to, ideally to real people that can give you feedback, but if not, your mobile phone, your laptop, or whatever. And this is a slide just to show the value of practice. This is actually my son. I'm fitting my son into the presentation here. When he was a young lad, he wanted to learn guitar. And you can see on the left-hand side, there he is, looking a little bit self-conscious with his electric guitar. But as things progressed, you can see the more he got out there in front of people, the more confident that he got. And he's now, a performer. He's actually on tour in Germany at the moment, just going between Munich and Cologne, where he's got a couple of gigs. But he developed, and the reason he developed was he did it a lot. From the age of 10 years old, he had a guitar strapped around him. When he came home from school, he might be making a sandwich, but he'd got a guitar on him at the time. And so literally, it's as simple as this. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And of course, if you get good feedback while you're doing it, then that enhances that process even more.
The presence over the time, your actual stage presence is very evolving. Of course, in this case, it's about music, but speaking to an audience in front and being in front of people, improving your presence and your the ability of performing. I think it's really through practice a lot. So yeah, it was a really nice example.
Thank
Kind of.
Yeah, that is, it's very important. And another Ziegler quote is that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly until you can do it well. It's all about the practice. So we're moving on to participation now. And as I said, people hate having things done to them or at them. They love having things done with them. And there's a very, very simple reason. And if you're writing notes down from this presentation, please write this very simple equation down. Involvement equals commitment. It really is as simple as that. The more you can involve people in what you're doing, the more committed they're going to be to the outcome. And the outcome is going to be good for them and good for you. So involvement equals commitment. I hear you asking, what kind of involvement can we do in a presentation, a conference speech, a lunch and learn at work? Well, there's lots of different ways you can invite people to participate. Sadly, of course, on a webinar like this, we're kind of limited to chats and Q&A and that kind of stuff. But when you're out face to face in front of people, not only can you ask questions, look for show of hands, tell stories, share experiences, and have people take part in demos. You can get people to contribute their expertise, but there's a whole range of other things you can do as well. You can see group discussions, breakout sessions, gamifying things. I went to a conference recently in London. It was called Demo Fest, and it was really all about the art of pre-sales. It was specifically about that, and they gamified the whole event. So when you went into a session, they scanned you, and then you got this little message saying, if you give us our review of this session, we're going to give you this many points. And we're already giving you this many points for attending the session, but if you complete the review as well, you'll get that many points. And at the end, people who had got a certain amount of points got t-shirts or caps or whatever it was. It was fully gamified. So it was a little bit of fun. So hats off to the people from Consensus who ran that event. It was called Demo Fest. And there's one taking place in New York. Demo Fest East Coast is coming up before too long, I think, in New York City. But there's lots of different ways. And what I suggest to people is while they're preparing their presentation, they should sit back, maybe hold their chin if they would like to, and just think about the different ways that they can involve people in what they're doing. Be intentional, spend some time thinking about it, thinking about the best ways. If you know that there's people in the audience who know more about this particular subject than you, because they've been out there in the field doing it, and you're a trainer or you're presenting, then make use of those people. Have them as a resource within the framework of what you're doing. So there's lots of different ways you can invite and encourage participation. Now, of course, in advanced level presentations, we then need to be careful about if somebody over participates and starts dominating, and it could be at the expense of the experience, but that's another story. We can deal with that one another day, Philippe. Then we come to performance, and performance is all about taking this group of people that, if you're not careful, could look a little bit apathetic, and moving into this group of people, which is a real life audience I addressed in Germany at an event called Lean Dus, all about the lean methodology, and it's in Dusseldorf, which is how they get the name Lean Dus. The thing is, attitudes are infectious. And so if you start making a presentation, you're not very enthusiastic about your subject matter, the chances are that you're going to transmit that. And so when it comes to performance, there's a few different things you can use. First of all, is be absolutely true to yourself. One of the things that some people fall down on with presentations is they think that they should be somebody else. Maybe they need to be funnier than they naturally are, or more serious than they naturally are, or louder than they naturally are. No, the most important thing is to actually be true to yourself. But you can use your voice and your body, projecting your voice, using pitches, the pitch of your voice, the pace of your delivery, and pauses, because pauses can be very, very profound when used at exactly the right time. Maybe
It's
that was
one of the for the poses and the pace, and for me, it's one of the things that I'm trying to learn when I'm speaking in front of people. I did a conference or an exposition in at Excali event last year in Miami, and it
With
was
Diego.
with Diego, exactly, and in front of few people, um, and it was recorded, and I was looking at it afterward, and I was like, okay, I rushed it out. The pace was like, I don't know why, but I was like maybe impressed of the audience in front of me. I was very nervous, and it's not me. Usually, I'm not that nervous in front of people. Usually, it's even the opposite. I'm more confident in front of a, a large audience instead of just speaking one to one. But I was looking at myself, and I was, oh, I I did not use any pauses, any silences at my advantages. I did not use the good pace. It was rushing out, trying. It was an important speech. It was an important speech for me.
Mm.
But honestly, now that I'm conscious of it for myself, it's I think it's really important to use these tools at your advantage as much as possible. It help you get the attention of the people, but also um, let the people sync the messages or what you're saying a little bit further in their mind instead of just rushing out everything and trying to finish the speech as fast as possible. It just doesn't make
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, agreed. And this is one of the places where practice can help, where practicing out loud and listening back to yourself. Now, you perhaps remember when you learned to drive a car, if you learned to drive a stick shift car, you perhaps had the same experience as many people. And I wonder whether people in the audience had this experience as well. When you went to change gear, the car swerved just a little bit. I don't mean off the road, but it swerved just a little bit. And it's because you couldn't do everything at once. There was too many different things. And so that's what happened. It's the same with presentations. When you first do presentations, there's so many things happening at once that you can't really monitor yourself. But the more you present and the more you practice, the more you get into this mindset where you can actually take a step back and listen to yourself and think, I'm speaking too fast at the moment. Or, I've not involved people as much as I should have done. You can have this mental conversation with yourself while you're delivering. But just thinking about the pace of delivery. Now, a lot of us actually listen to things faster than they were recorded, don't you? You might listen to your voicemails at 1.5 speed, or you might watch a YouTube video at 1.25 or 1.5, or even 2 times speed. Because actually, faster delivery, providing it's your own language and not a foreign language, but faster delivery in your own language does not impede understanding. You can understand things even though they're going faster. However, and there is a however, Philippe, the psychology of this, if you see somebody that's speaking really fast in a presentation, the psychology is you subconsciously think, hang on a minute, that person doesn't really want to be there. The reason they've speeded up is because they want it to finish so they can get on to the next thing they're doing. And so there is a psychological element to this. But in terms of actually understanding, fast delivery is not a problem.
And the truth is not because we don't want to be in front of the people, it's just because we're stressed out of being in front of people. It's not because we don't want to be there. So yeah, it's counterintuitive and really counterproductive for yourself. So
Yeah,
definitely, yeah.
indeed. Okay, so let's move on to the last one. It's post-event. Now, of course, you hear salespeople talk about the fortune being in the follow-up, and it's the same with presentations. You really need to actually have dialogue with the person that asked you to do the presentation in the first place. I call that person the sponsor, and if possible, the audience as well, to find out what they thought after the event. One thing that I can't stand is drive-by stuff. And I'm not really talking about drive-by shootings here. I'm talking about drive-by presentations where people just come along, deliver a presentation, disappear off, and then they're never seen again. I'm all about trying to stamp this out. And you'll remember that we were talking about having that agreement. And that agreement was not only with the person that asked you to do the presentation, but it was also to the audience as well. Well, what that means is at the end of the presentation, you can ask the audience almost immediately, maybe by way of a survey or by way of some kind of sheet of paper or evaluation form at the end, what they thought about the actual presentation. But to come back to my original example, it's one thing knowing that you did a good job of the presentation, but you should also ask yourself, have those wider level objectives been achieved? In other words, in the example I used near the beginning, are we now getting less tech support phone calls on this new product? Because if we're not, maybe that training needs to be repeated to other people, or that presentation, or maybe there's new content that needs to be given to that same audience. So, you know, there's a range of different things that we can do to make sure we've effectively followed up. And we don't just follow up immediately after the presentation. We can come back some weeks after, or even some months after, to see that. I see there's a chat there from Brian. Not entirely sure what it means.
Yeah, I'm not sure neither. Brian, if you can elaborate a little bit, that would be nice to understand. You mentioned that I can see them, so not sure, but yeah.
So I want to ask you and the audience a question, Philippe, and that is, have you ever seen something like this? Maybe not this exact thing, but have you ever had that message, whether it's Vimeo or YouTube or Rumble or whatever it is? Have you ever seen this kind of buffering type of symbol?
For me, yes, definitely. It's more, it's more rare nowadays because the internet connection are better. But
yeah, indeed, and Roy's seen it as well. Thank you for that input, Roy. Yeah, we've probably all seen this. And what does it indicate? What problem have we got when, you know, we get this situation arise? Okay. Brian's just clarified the fact that he was responding to a question. Thank you for that clarification, Brian. So what I'm going to say here is the reason that we see this buffering screen is we've got a bad connection somewhere. Now, it might be bad Wi-Fi. It might be a bad underlying network. It could even be something wrong with the server at the other end that's streaming to you. But whatever, it's a bad connection of some kind. And here's the point I want to make, that as communicators, we need to have a very good connection with our audience. We need to make the bandwidth with our audience as wide as possible. And the name we give to that bandwidth in communication terms is rapport. It's our rapport, that's our connection between us and the audience. And the wider we can make that rapport, the more we can develop that rapport, the more we'll be able to read the room, to come back to what you were saying earlier on, Philippe. We can read the faces, we can read the body languages, and maybe because we've opened that rapport wide enough and made it a nice, friendly and easy environment to be in, people can put their hands up and interrupt us and ask questions as we go along, because that's going to be a very, very useful thing for us. And so the wider we can make this, and yeah, thank you, Roy, for talking about poor bandwidth as well. You're quite right. It's a bandwidth issue. And so the point I want to make here is we need to have maximum bandwidth with our audience. And what I'd like to show you now is the way that these 7 power presenting protocols align when you put them in a certain way, when you go through the purpose and you agree that with the audience and the sponsor, when you talk to the people that you're going to present to, when you plan with them in mind to give them the best experience, when you consider their preferences about the way that they would like to learn, when you practice with them in mind to give them the best experience, when you brainstorm all the different forms of participation that you could think of, again, with your audience in mind and the way that they would like to be involved, when you present in a way and perform in a way that's powerful to them, and when you talk about post-event activities, can you see you get the word rapport woven through these protocols? And that's because on every single one of those protocols, you were building, developing, and increasing your rapport. The fact that you talked to your audience in the first place, or a representative from the audience or somebody that knew them, to make sure that you were going to give them what they needed, the fact that you planned it for them, you considered their preferences. I won't go through it all again, but you see the point I'm making. You've worked to deliver.
It's adding up very, very well. It's very interesting. It's you need to build that up. All the components are necessary to deliver a powerful presentation.
Exactly. Yes, you're quite right. So, true to form, we're not going to put questions right at the end. We are coming towards an end now, but let's just ask if there are any questions that people have before we come to the last part.
Doesn't seem so, but can you explain what's that QR code?
Yeah, that QR code will take people through to a little survey so we can find out what people think. I don't know, maybe you'll have a one as well, Philippe, but this takes people through to a little survey. And if they complete the survey, I dangle in front of them the idea that they'll get some tips emailed to them about how they can make their presentations even better along the lines of these 7 power presenting protocols.
Right, thank you.
Now, I've not seen any questions come in, and I can see that we're against the clock, so I'll just finish up very quickly. So the key points is communication and presentations are the keys for you to stand out in the tech world. Yes, of course, your domain knowledge and your technical experience is important, but you will set yourself apart with communications and presentation skills. The current level of conference speeches and other presentations out there is suboptimal, to say the least. So if you put some work in, you will be head and shoulders above other people. Oh, yeah, we've got, okay, it says, can I share the link to the survey on my phone? Sorry, can I share the link to the survey? Yes, I can for you, Roy. I'll do that in a moment. And then I want to put the ball in your court and say to you, Philippe, and to the audience to seize the opportunities and make as many presentations as you can, because the more you do it, the better you get, and you'll achieve the level of success that you deserve from your technical skills and abilities if you add on top of that the ability to make great presentations as well.
It's very interesting, honestly. I did read about the 7 principal protocols before today, and you know, blog article does not deliver this content the way that you are doing it today, and the way it's really the way you are presenting it makes much more sense than just reading a blog article about or knowledge article about these protocols, these principles. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Okay, so last couple of slides here. So next steps are get out there and start presenting, because the more you do it, the better you get. And actually, here's another pro tip. Make opportunities for presentations even when they don't exist. So if you're at work and you see a problem because team A over here doesn't really understand what team B, your team, is doing, have a word with your boss and say to the boss, do you think there's a problem here? And if he says yes, say, well, I'll do a lunch and learn for you. Get some pizzas in and I'll do a presentation to help people understand and oil the wheels. And then, of course, as the way we came by each other's contact in the first place, Philippe, I deliver training to people and organizations to help them be better in this area. So there's that QR code again. I'm going to go off screen share and I will get the link and pop it in the chat. But I'll come off screen share now. And thank you for this opportunity, Philippe.
It's all my pleasure. Like I was saying, the way you're bringing this subject, all this information, it's much more relevant and valuable for me than just reading an article, which usually I'm reading a lot to learn. But all the example, all the way I can't repeat myself enough. But yeah, you're bringing much more value in the way that you're explaining than just reading a knowledge article. And I note myself a very specific thing about the plan, the proof, the proof acronym. It's for me, it's definitely something that I'm gonna revisit and try to make sure that I have this in mind when I'm preparing any speaking opportunities that I have. even in front of my team, in front of my coworker. Definitely, it's a good framework to be able to prepare your presentation in an efficient way. So yeah,
Well,
this
yeah,
one,
frameworks make the brain work. That's what they're all about.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, and I'm somebody who's doing things like with intuition mostly, without much preparation most of the time. But the way you brought that up is for me, it came give me the good reasons to be more prepared, and thus a little bit beside the intuition.
Great, great. Well, just a quick thing for Roy, who was after the link. I've popped the link in the chat, but I think it's only gone to the host and panelists. So if you could take that link, please, Philippe, and copy it so that everybody can see it in the chat, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Whoops. Right.
Brilliant. There it goes. Yeah. So, Roy, you should be able to see that link now.
So
Great.
thank you, David. It was very interesting, honestly. It's a topic. It's something that I wasn't really aware of all the underlying. I'm following a lot of coach speaker and so on, but all the concept and the theory behind is is very interesting, and now I just want to know more. It's yeah, definitely. I just want to dig into it and try to read about all those concept and theories much more. Maybe hire you.
Well, that's a possibility, Philip. You never know.
That would. So very briefly, I just want to go through a brief presentation about VoIP.ms. For most of the audience here probably know who we are already, but just want to make sure that I'm doing a real run through. So VoIP.ms, who for the one who doesn't know us, it's a VoIP provider based in Montreal. Um, we were founded in 2007. We offer phone number and VoIP services in more than 60 countries, over 20 rate centers in Canada and United States. We offer a fully hosted platform, feature rich, bring your own solution, pay as you go. And it's asterisk based. So David knows our platforms very well. We also have an ecosystem of all those certified partners. Or philosophy, it's bring your own device or bring your own solution. You can bring pretty much anything you want. It could be an asterisk PBX directly, or you can use soft phones. You can use even SBCs, as you can see here with telco bridges. You can use Excali, which is an omni-channel PBXs. There's many tool that you can leverage with VoIP.ms. So this is just a short list. More to come. Probably in the coming up 2 weeks, you will see a MSP omnichannel, dedicated MSP omnichannel solution that will be added to this list. So stay tuned. We offer a lot of feature if you connect the phone or cell phone directly to VoIP.ms. This is just a quick list of what we are offering, but pretty much anything that's a PBX can offer, you can find it there. But also you can connect your own PBXs like 3CX, Asterix, Vodia, name it. There's so many of them to one over 50 server strategically located across the globe. We offer the service in Europe, Amsterdam, Paris, London, and also in Sydney in Australia. And from East Coast to West Coast in Canada and United States, you have a local pub that you can connect your appliance, your solution to us. We also have a full API. Not gonna go through all the function that we have. It's will be there tomorrow morning, but you can build up pretty much anything you want through our API. The business model is very simple. It's prepaid and pay as you go, no contract. It's fully self-serve, so if you can pretty much manage everything you want without asking anyone. You don't need VoIP.ms customer service, which we also offer, but if you want, you can do everything by yourself, fully contractless, and we also offer free porting in Canada and United States. We offer porting in also in more than in a couple of countries. I don't know the number exactly, but there's sometime a fee associated to it. Here's our team. So I'm the little guy in the middle here. I really like this photo. I'm presenting it every time I'm doing a webinar. It's to show how close that we are all together. Not everybody were there, but almost everybody was there. We have a team like more than 50. We're closer to 65 now. And average seniority of our employees at VoIP.ms, it's 6 years. So just to give you a good idea, we have a lot of knowledge in what we do. We don't offer internet. We don't offer MVNO services or whatsoever. We are specialized in VoIP services, so our staff really know what they do in the VoIP industry. We offer support in French, English, and Spanish. And also the support is offered 24/7 through chat, tickets, and email. As you can see here, we have a VoIP.ms Wiki, we have or YouTube channel with tons of webinars, video tutorials, tips and tricks, and so on. We still have a Facebook community group, but we just launched a community page that you can access from your VoIP.ms account. So this group will be removed or will probably fade out at some point. It's still open. However, we encourage people to go through our community page directly. And here's your contact at VoIP.ms, myself. Feel free to take and note my email address, my direct toll-free number, and if there's anything, you can reach out to me directly. Also, remember, we will send the recording of this webinar by email afterward with David contact details and a couple of information if you want to get in touch with David afterward. Unless you don't want me to share your contact detail.
No, I definitely do. And one thing I wanted to say in closing, Philippe, is when we're recording this, sort of in early November, is the kind of time when people start thinking about sales kickoffs and things for the new year. And I do have a humorous and engaging version of this talk called Why Nerds Aren't Heard. The 7 ways that geeks sabotage their own presentations and what to do about it. And as you can imagine, each of the 7 ways that geeks sabotage their own presentations, I have a protocol that meets it and combats it and puts it right. And so if people are wanting that kind of non-technical presentation as part of a sales kickoff, I'm always delighted to assist.
Well noted. I'm preparing my sales kickoff for next year as well. So probably it's going to be one thing that I will be interested to know more about.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Philippe. I've enjoyed speaking with you and speaking to our audience today.
It's all my pleasure, David. I hope we will meet together at the next event in Miami at the IT Expo.
I'm planning to be there for sure. And I'd like to also thank Brian and Roy in the audience for their input as well as we've gone on.
Great. Thanks again. And thanks everyone to join today and have a nice day.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.